My first pregnancy didn't go as planned, but it changed my life forever. Pregnancy is supposed to be one of the most beautiful times in a woman's life, or at least that's what people say. And in many ways, it is. But what no one really talks about is how isolating it can be, how overwhelming. I never truly understood that until I experienced it myself. My name is Emily Carter, and this is my story. I was 28 years old when I found out I was pregnant with my first child. My husband, Ryan, and I had been trying for almost a year, so when that little pink line appeared on the test, I was ecstatic. We both were. We imagined what life would be like with our son, how we'd decorate his nursery, what kind of parents we would be. It was also exciting in those early months. Ryan was over the moon, but with the excitement also came responsibility. He threw himself into work, taking on extra shifts, working late into the night, making sure we were financially prepared for everything. I understood why he was doing it, I really did. He wanted to make sure we had everything we needed, that our son would have the best start in life. But as my pregnancy progressed, I found myself feeling more and more alone. I worked as long as I could, wanting to contribute, wanting to keep my mind busy, but eventually, my body had other plans. By the time I hit my third trimester, I was exhausted. My feet ached, my back was in constant pain, and the simple act of standing for too long left me breathless. My doctor recommended that I stop working and rest. So, I did. And that's when the loneliness really set in. The days felt long. Ryan was gone from early morning until late at night, and while I knew he was doing it for us, I couldn't shake the feeling of being left behind. I had always been independent, but pregnancy had changed me. I needed support, company, someone to remind me that I wasn't doing this alone. I reached out to my parents, hoping they could spend some time with me, but they were busy with their own lives, their jobs, and their other grandchildren. I understood, but it still hurt. Then I turned to Ryan's mother, hoping that maybe she would be there for me in a way my own parents couldn't be. But she, too, was tied up with work and obligations. I began to feel like I was asking too much, like I was being unreasonable. Everyone had their own lives, their own responsibilities, and here I was, sitting at home, waiting, feeling more alone than I ever had before. And then, just when I thought things couldn't feel worse, Ryan told me he had to go on a business trip. A month before my due date. I begged him to stay, told him how scared I was, how I needed him with me. But he reassured me that everything would be fine, that I still had time, that he would be back before the baby arrived. And then he left. I had never felt so vulnerable. The days crawled by, and every little ache, every strange sensation, sent me into a panic. What if I went into labor early? What if something went wrong? What if I needed someone, and no one was there? That was the moment I truly understood how much women need support during pregnancy. It's not just about the physical changes, the appointments, the preparations, it's about the emotional weight of it all. The fear, the uncertainty, the overwhelming sense that your life is about to change in ways you can't even begin to comprehend. In those moments, women need someone to hold their hand, to tell them that everything will be okay, to remind them that they are not alone. I wish someone had done that for me. But instead, I had to learn to comfort myself. I had to remind myself that I was strong, that I could do this, that no matter how alone I felt, I was not truly alone. My baby was with me, growing, waiting, depending on me. And if I couldn't count on anyone else, I would count on myself. I hope that if someone out there is feeling the way I did, they know they are not alone. That it's okay to feel scared, to feel overwhelmed. But more than anything, I hope they have someone to remind them that they are loved, that they are supported, and that they don't have to go through it alone. Because no woman should ever have to face pregnancy in isolation. I don't think I ever fully understood what loneliness was until that night. The days leading up to it had already been difficult. My body felt heavier than ever, and every little movement took effort. I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep properly. Every small ache or tightening in my belly sent a jolt of fear through me. I was in my final month of pregnancy, my husband was away on a business trip, and even though I had tried to stay positive, the fear had been creeping in. I told myself I was strong enough to handle this. But then, everything changed in a single moment. It started as a dull pain in my back. At first, I thought it was just another discomfort, the kind that came with carrying a child so close to full term. But then it sharpened, wrapping around my lower stomach, pressing down in a way that stole my breath. I tried shifting my position, drinking water, and even taking deep breaths, but the pain didn't go away. Instead, it kept coming in waves, each one stronger than the last. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone and called my husband. My hands were shaking as I held it to my ear, hoping, begging, that he would pick up. But his phone went to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. He was probably in a meeting or on a plane. I sent him a text, "Something is wrong. Call me back." I tried my mother next. No answer. My father. Straight to voicemail. My in-laws. My best friend. One by one, I called every single person I could think of who might be able to come and help me. And one by one, the calls either went unanswered or were met with apologies. People had work, responsibilities, other children to care for. No one could come. That's when the fear really hit me. I was alone. I had never felt so abandoned in my entire life. I curled up on the couch, trying to breathe through the pain, trying not to let the panic overwhelm me. My mind raced through every worst-case scenario. What if something was wrong with the baby? What if I went into labor right here, alone? What if something happened to me, and no one found me in time? I buried my face in my hands, tears spilling over. I couldn't do this. I wasn't strong enough. Then, in the middle of my spiral, something happened. It was just a thought at first, a whisper in my mind, but it wasn't my own. "Don't be afraid. I am with you." I froze. The words weren't something I had consciously thought. They were just there, as though they had been placed in my mind, gentle but firm. Comforting. For the first time in hours, I took a steady breath. I had never been particularly religious. I believed in God in the way that most people did, casually, distantly. I respected faith, but I had never deeply explored it for myself. I never sought out signs or miracles. And yet, in that moment, I felt something I had never felt before. I wasn't alone. The pain was still there. The situation hadn't magically resolved itself. But something inside me had shifted. The panic lessened. My breathing slowed. A warmth spread through my chest, as if something, or someone, was reminding me that I was strong enough. That I was not abandoned. That no matter who else was or wasn't here for me, I wasn't truly alone. After that moment, I stopped shaking. I stopped crying. I sat there in silence, absorbing what had just happened. Had God really spoken to me? Had He always been speaking, and I had just never been listening? Eventually, the pain faded. It hadn't been labor after all, just my body adjusting as it prepared for what was to come. But the fear I had felt, the overwhelming helplessness, I knew I would never forget it. And I knew that what had happened in that moment wasn't something I could explain away. So now, I ask you, have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever thought you were completely alone, only to realize that maybe, just maybe, you weren't? Have you ever had a thought, a feeling, a sign that made you stop and wonder if God was speaking to you? Because I truly believe He was with me that night. And if He was with me then, I know He is with me now. The night started like any other, but something felt different. A deep ache in my lower back kept returning in steady waves, stronger each time. I had read enough to know these were contractions, but it was too early. Ryan had only been gone a week, and the doctor assured us that the baby wouldn't come for another month. Yet, here I was, gripping the edge of the couch, timing each sharp pull inside me. Panic surged through me. I needed to call an ambulance. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone and dialed 911. As I waited, I called Ryan. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I left him a message, my voice cracking as I explained what was happening. Then I called my parents, but they were at work and couldn't leave immediately. My in-laws were out of town visiting relatives. My closest friend, Claire, had a sick toddler at home and couldn't come either. One by one, the safety nets I had counted on were slipping away. I had never felt so alone. Then, in the midst of my fear, something happened. A thought, not my own, settled into my heart. Don't be afraid. I am with you. It was a whisper, yet it resonated deep within me, steadying my racing heart. I believed in God, but I had never leaned on him, and yet, in this moment of absolute vulnerability, when every human support had disappeared, he was here. I exhaled and clung to that voice as the paramedics arrived and helped me onto the stretcher. The ride to the hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. When I arrived, the nurses checked me, confirming that labor had indeed started. I was wheeled into a delivery room, and the doctor on duty gave quick instructions before telling the nurses to get me settled. There was no time to process. Everything was happening too fast. Panic crept back in. I had planned for a partnered birth. Ryan was supposed to be here, holding my hand, telling me I could do this. But he wasn't. And the fear of the unknown overwhelmed me. Then, again, a familiar thought came, don't be afraid. I am your support and strength. Just trust in me. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The pain was real, the uncertainty was real, but so was this peace washing over me. It didn't make sense, but I held onto it like a lifeline. The hours blurred together in a whirlwind of contractions, medical staff moving in and out, and my own body working through the process of bringing a new life into the world. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but I wasn't alone. I wasn't abandoned. I felt carried through it in a way I couldn't explain. And then, finally, he was here. David. A beautiful, perfect little boy with his father's eyes and my nose. The moment they placed him in my arms, every ache, every moment of fear, every doubt, disappeared. He was real. He was mine. And in that moment, I understood that I had never truly been alone. 2 weeks passed in a hazy mix of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and indescribable love. Ryan returned home as soon as he could, devastated that he had missed David's birth. He apologized over and over, but I didn't hold it against him. This wasn't something anyone could have predicted. We had planned everything to the smallest detail, but life had unfolded in its own way. And maybe that was the lesson. The whole family gathered to meet David. My parents, my in-laws, Claire, everyone who had been unreachable in that moment of crisis was now here, celebrating with us. I realized something profound as I watched them holding my son, fussing over him, and showering him with love. God had arranged everything so that, in my hardest moment, I had no one else to turn to but him. If Ryan had been home, if my parents had been available, if anyone had been there to hold my hand, I might not have heard that voice. I might not have learned that God was not some distant presence, but someone who stepped in at my weakest, carrying me when I couldn't stand on my own. Looking back, I see the beauty in the chaos. Life doesn't always go according to our plans, but that's okay. Because there is a greater plan at work, one that we may not always understand in the moment. So if you ever find yourself in a place where everything seems to be falling apart, when the people you rely on can't be there, take a deep breath. Let go of the panic. Trust. Because sometimes, it's in those very moments that God is speaking the loudest, reminding you that you are never truly alone.